Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I'm here with Nomalanga and Moses from Healthy Black Woman. How you doing today, Noma?
I'm doing great, boys. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and you and I, we like to do this segment called Boyce and Nomalanga, where we talk about various issues, particularly that relate to the black community, to black women, to black relationships, things like that, and really a multitude of topics. I mean, that doesn't define the entirety of what you understand, but I'm always curious to know your thoughts. Now, this week I wanted to ask you. You wrote an article on naturallymoi.com. That's naturally moi, like MOI, and the title is basically that he wants too much sex, things women things women need to stop whining about. And it got a lot of response. I mean, some people appreciated what you said. Some people did not appreciate what you said. In fact, one person by the name of Karen Hall Nichols says this article failed to add any real insight because the author is relying on extremes to get her point across, which fails to offer any real information. But then there's another person right after Karen named Jamal Rashid, who Jamal Rashid, PhD. He wants to make sure that you know who Jamal Rashid is. He says, look, the list could continue past five things, but it is a starter. And both of these comments got a lot of likes from the readers, and it almost looks like it is indicative of just sort of this ongoing kind of battle of the sexes that some of us are participating in, some of us are not, right? If you look at, in a way, you can almost look at black women and black men the same way you look at whites and blacks. There are some whites and blacks who get along wonderfully, and there are some whites and blacks who can't stand each other, who live in these extremes. And that's what I'm kind of seeing here. So I guess before I get into this, I want to ask you that question. I mean, do you feel that maybe the reaction to your article, where you're kind of, saying to women, maybe instead of looking at the things that you don't like, you can also focus on some of the things that you do appreciate. Do you feel that the reaction was kind of driven by some sort of, just this division between black men and black women that you're seeing in America?
I think that when I write, most of the time I'm talking to women, and I generally try not to address men when I'm writing, because I'm a life balance expert for women. So I generally try not to talk to men. And what tends to happen a lot of times when I write articles that prick a little bit, is my response from women may be, stop saying that, or I don't like what you're saying. And the men will say, yeah, tell them, tell them, that's right, tell them. So I'm used to that reaction, but I don't think it necessarily is because of division. It's more so perspective. I'm writing from a very leaning towards one side, and of course, the side that I'm leaning towards, if I'm edifying them, they're going to say yes, that's great. And if I'm kind of tapping them on the shoulder and saying, hey, look, maybe you want to look at this and change this, and you might get a reaction of, no, how dare you tell me that?
So do you think that maybe one of the symptoms of this division is that everybody tends to applaud for the people who tell them what they want to hear? Right? Like you see these so-called relationship gurus on the internet who will get a million fans because they will tell one group or the other exactly what they want to hear. You are wonderful, you're beautiful, you're a queen, it's his fault. If he don't appreciate you, girl, you need to move on. Right? Stuff like that. I mean, it seems like that's kind of what you see. And I'm talking about the female side, but you see it on the male side as well. I mean, you'll see men that will just say things that are flat out sexist, that are just bitter and mean. And sometimes you'll hear these comments and you'll say, wow, now I understand why this woman over here has these horrible things to say about men, because there are men like you out here that are just flat out abusive, and emotionally and psychologically and well, which is the same thing, but physically and otherwise. I mean, do you think that that's kind of the world we're living in, where people either come together or they live in their extremes?
Yes, I remember one mom I had a conversation with some years ago before I even had kids. She said, "You know what's sad is that we're raising kids in an era of everybody gets a trophy." So, you can have a race, there's 10 people racing, even number 10 gets a trophy and they're told that they're a winner and so forth. And people never actually learn to deal with a negative opinion, a person having a negative opinion of them. They never learn to think about the fact that maybe they could do better or that they didn't win and so forth. So that translates into this other genre of, media where you get people who are saying to you, you're okay just the way you are, honey. Don't let anybody tell you anything, honey. And the person's a wreck and they're a mess. Do we need people to encourage us and support us and so forth? Yes. But if that's the only thing that's happening and your life is a little dysfunctional or very dysfunctional, that's not going to help you. You do need to balance what you say to people in the sense that if you call yourself a person who cares about them, you do need to say some things that are going to be what I call tough love. And then you do need to say some things that are encouraging and supportive. So I find that people respond more to being encouraged and supported, even when they need to hear something that's a little bit more tough love.
Well, it's funny. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of two storylines that I saw that were almost identical on two shows I used to love. One was called The Facts of Life. I don't know if you ever
Mhm.
saw The Facts of Life. You take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and
It
there you
sounds a
have
little
The
bit
Facts of
familiar,
Life.
but I
Yeah,
don't,
well, Kim Fields was on it, and Tootie, she rode roller skates, but that was the '80s,
Okay,
and
now I
and
remember.
and this is now, right? And then you had A Different World, and they had actually the same storyline, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I'm wrong, but I remember the storyline was basically where you had this kid who was really smart, and they were like, "Oh, well, you can come into our school. All you have to do is take the test." And it turns out they didn't want to take the test. And when you dug deep into it, what you found out was that their reasoning was, look, as long as no one ever tested me, I could always pretend like I was the smartest person in the world. I could always believe that to be true. But the minute I have to actually take a test, I find out that I might not be the smartest person in the world, or even running. Like, I think when she compared it to running and said, I used to think I was the fastest little girl on the planet, and then when someone timed me and told me I was slow, it just broke my heart. So, do you think that maybe sometimes accepting praise only allows you to escape reality enough to make yourself, just feel good no matter where you are, which to some extent it seems like that's actually not a bad thing all the time, except for when it gets to the point where you become so delusional that your reality is incredibly detached from your psychology. And so you go into the world thinking that you got it all together, thinking that you are the catch, thinking that you've done everything right, and the world treats you in a way that is not consistent with the way you see yourself. And so then what happens is you lick your wounds and you have a choice. You can either correct the difference and get what you want, or you can say it's not me, the rest of the world is screwed up. Is that kind of what you see?
Right. As you were talking, I wrote down the word blame. You're going to find that a lot of people say that the reason why the way that they want it to be is because of 10 different things, and all those 10 things have nothing to do with them. And the brand of women's empowerment that I like is the one that refrains from blaming anyone or anything for the outcome of your life. Although there are factors, of course, that affect all of us. But the brand of women's empowerment that I like is owning your choices, owning your decisions, and owning your life, and knowing that you're the person who makes the most significant impact on your own life. And people don't like that. Well, I shouldn't say people. Some people don't like that. They would rather, oh, it's him, girl. He's this and they're that, and they did that to you, and you're special, you're beautiful just the way you are. Don't change. And then your life is a wreck. And of course, when your life is a wreck, you can turn around and say, well, of course, my life is a wreck. This happened to me. They did that to me. I live in a place where this is the situation, and all these horrible things are happening to me because of whatever. But it's not me. I'm okay as I am, and that's what I find.
I'm gonna paraphrase two very quick stories, and I want to get your take on this. One involves a young man, one involves a young woman. Okay, so in both in their 20s, at least
Okay.
when the story begins. So for the young man, I remember I was counseling him about women, and I remember he said, I'm a Christian and I want a woman who is pure, whatever that means, right? And he said, the problem I'm having, Dr. Watkins, is all the women I meet, they're not pure. They're so dirty. And I met a woman that was so, that I thought she was the one. We would pray together, and we would spend a lot of time together. And then I found out that, and she told me that she, wasn't sleeping with anybody. It turns out that she was sleeping with one of my friends. And it was actually his friend that told him, hey, hey man, she's not what you think. I slept with her last week, and I'm just telling you because I'm your friend, right? Now, I remember the advice I gave him was, I said, let me tell you a secret. I said, I don't think any woman out here is pure in the way that you think purity should be manifest. Every sex is natural, sexual desire is natural, and maybe it's possible that she didn't. Maybe it's possible that she really does like you and wants to be with you, but realizes that you're not ready for the kind of relationship that she kind of needs, so she's filling in the gaps until you come around. And again, I said that doesn't mean that you should or should not be with her, but I would not make the assumption that that because she has these needs, that somehow that implies that she's not worthy or that she doesn't want you. She maybe does want you, and maybe you should kind of relax your definition of what it means for a woman to be a good woman, right? And because I think in his mind he felt that all women were just screwed up. None of them are pure. And I just don't. I thought that was a little bit strange. And so now to balance it, I'm going to tell a story about a woman I knew, who was when I met her when she was maybe 24, 25. Very pretty girl. Met a lot of guys, and we were friends. And I remember that she had some other good friends that I thought were really doing her a disservice. This woman met a new guy every couple months. I mean, and these were great men, smart guys, had money, whatever it is that people want, tall, handsome, all that crap. So, but every time, maybe 2, 3 months in, maybe 6 weeks in, the relationships would all kind of crumble, and she's crying, she's miserable. Her friends gather around her, a couple of her friends, and say, "Girl, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Stop letting people tell you that it's your fault." And so, literally, I remember watching this pattern happen for like 14 years, like 13, 14. And then she got to the point where she was not 25 anymore. She was menopausal. And now, certain opportunities aren't there the way they used to be. And I'm not generalizing here, but we know things change. And she looks back on some of these lost opportunities and says, now, in her 40s, maybe I should have looked at things differently. Maybe my friends weren't doing me a favor by always telling me that it wasn't my fault. Because I remember thinking and watching and saying, no, actually, I think you may want to think about this. And my general point here is this. I think that you're never really going to get ahead in life if you're always blaming the world for the situations that exist around you. You are like a little planet with your own little gravitational pull, your own little orbit. And the things that revolve around you are the things that you have attracted or chosen to engage with. It is you. It is you. It is you. So stop. There's nothing empowering about me telling you that it's everybody else's fault. I am not doing you a favor when I allow you to build an armor of illusion, the shield of fantasy, to protect you from the frightening reality that maybe you're not as perfect as you want to be. And because what's the alternative? I mean, what, to just go through life frustrated and mad and to feel like you've been victimized and exploited and that the world has just crapped all over you? There's nothing empowering about that. So I told you my stories, and I got a little long-winded, but I'd love to get your take on that. Uh-oh, I think your audio went down. There you
How's,
are.
how's that? Okay. With the first young man that you talked about, I think that, I came from a pretty conservative home, I should say. Grew up in what people would probably call a Christian home. And I think that if a young man decides that he wants to be quote unquote pure and he wants a young woman who is pure, I think he has the right to want that and he has the right to look for that. However, obviously not everybody's going to be that. And you do draw to yourself, I believe, what you are. But at the same time, I think that sometimes we do go overboard, which is what my article was suggesting in terms of what we say we want, to the point where we overlook the good things in a person because you're so focused on one little thing or a series of things that you're disgruntled about. So I do agree with you in that sometimes we do need to relax. I don't, people hate that when you say relax because it sounds like, oh, you want me to settle. I think I said that in the article. People say people want them to settle. But the truth is sometimes not settling, if that's the word that you want to use, means that you actually do end up settling for a life of nobody wants to be with you, you know?
Well, I would definitely say that I compare it to looking for a job. You know, some of us have a lot of qualifications and we're in a good market, so we can get a lot of money for very little work. Some of us don't have as many qualifications, so we might
Right.
have to work a little harder to get a little bit less. But I think being realistic about the market is very important. Like if you have a GED, and no experience, and you go out and say, I want someone to give me $400,000 a year to work 10 hours a week, you're probably going to end up unemployed for a really long time. Now, if being unemployed is okay with you, like if you're fine with it, then okay, look for that $400,000 a year job that's going to pay you to work 10 hours a week. You can do that, but don't set such an unrealistic expectation in your job search, and then get angry and say, oh, all these employers, they want you to work 40 hours a week, and they only
They're
want to pay
racist.
me 75,000 a year. Right? They're racist, they're sexist, and they're just they're just a bunch of dogs. These corporations, I mean, really, so I would just say that that's what it requires. I mean, I think it comes down to just being honest and realistic, and really one fundamental question. Are you getting what you want out of life? If you're not getting what you want out of life, it's not life's fault. It's not the world's fault.
Right.
There's a gap between what you are and where you need to be to get what you want, and that's that bridge has to be confronted, or you're gonna go through life frustrated.
Right. And since you brought up the job example, one thing I will say is, before you go out looking for a job, there is some level of preparation that you have to do, and some self. You have to look at yourself. In other words, you have to look at what are my qualifications, what are my expectations relative to my qualifications, and I think that's what the missing piece is here. I think that we look, not we necessarily, you and I, but people do tend to look at what they want and what they're not getting, and not necessarily what they're putting out there in order to have that expectation or to get what you want. And I will say, I think I've said this over and over again, you do draw to yourself what you are. You really cannot escape that. You can't escape that. Even if you get to a point where you get something really, really good without necessarily deserving it, you tend to lose it. If you're a crazy woman, who's just a hot mess, and you somehow get this wonderful man walking into your life, he would have to be equally crazy to stay. But a normal, self-respecting man will exit as soon as possible when he realizes what he's dealing with. So you can't escape the fact that in order to get good things in your life, you do have to cultivate them in yourself. And that's basically the gist of what I was saying.
Well, I'm glad that you gave that gist, and I hope people will listen to you on this. I know a lot of people do, but then I know you get a lot of backlash. The same way anybody would get backlash if you're telling people things that they need to hear as opposed to telling what they want to hear, right?
Right.
That's just a fact, and that's the curse of being Nomalanga, I think. But at the same time, I think that if people want to really know if your advice works, they should just look at your life. I mean, you didn't become Mrs. Botswana by being lazy. It took discipline, hard work, preparation, dieting. You had to do a lot of things, so that made you, that strength in your upbringing, that discipline, is what allowed you to be so successful. You wouldn't have had this 9-year marriage. I'm sure it's almost 10 years that you've been with your husband now, right?
Yeah.
That 10-year marriage. If you hadn't been willing to work through some things and do some critical self-analysis and make yourself into a better person, push him to be a better person, right? You wouldn't have these two beautiful children that are so intelligent and capable. You wouldn't be as well educated as you are, and so I think that, what I would what I would advise anybody who's looking for someone to guide them on life, to coach them, advise them, whatever, the best indicator a lot of times is, how well are you, how good are you at achieving your own goals, right? If a person has had a string of broken relationships and they're telling you, girl, if he does this, you need to get out. I mean, what they're doing is they're inviting you to a party of misery. They're inviting you to come to hell with them
Right.
because who they are is what made their life into what it is right now. So
Right.
don't imitate people who have failed at something that you are seeking to do. Doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. It's insane.
Right.
And the thing is that, basically we have, sometimes we can have advice that becomes, as Nietzsche used to say, an opiate for the masses. And these opiates can be, people telling you that you're perfect just the way you are, and that it's always, her fault or always his fault, or there's something wrong with the world and nothing wrong with you. And what that does, I think the reason people like that is because it's almost like a type of church for them, right? It's an addiction. It's like, you tell me these things that make me feel better. And so even if my life isn't actually better, the fact that I feel better, that's easier than actually trying to make it better, right? Just the same way people shoot heroin in their arm or use
And
cocaine,
alcohol.
right? You alter reality internally, and it makes you feel like everything's okay. But the fact is, once you sober up and you go back into the 3D world that we live in, you find out that your life is still a mess, and you don't know why. And instead of living life proactively and building the life that you want, you spend your life living reactively, putting out one fire after another, and you're accepting the life that lands on your doorstep. And I think that's the gap between you and maybe people that aren't willing to do the work to improve their lives. So that's my little theory. I'll let you get the last word on that.
Thank you for pointing those things out. But I was going to say that, and just kind of reiterate that you made some really good points and said that one of the things that you might want to look at before you take advice from somebody is who are they and what is the state of their life. And that has been a guiding factor in my life is I do really look at the person who's giving the advice before I take the advice, or even if I'm polite enough to take the advice, I know what to do with it once they leave, is throw it out. And then the other thing is, and I think I've said this over and over and over again, is just take responsibility for your own life. That's it. Just take responsibility for your own life, for your own actions, for your own decisions, for your own choices. And unless and until you're willing to do that, your life will continue to frustrate you and challenge you, and not in a good way.
Absolutely, I love it. I love it. And that, you know what? I'm gonna shut down the conversation on that. Just, get advice from people that should be advising you, that are gonna help you build the life that you want. Stop being a damn victim. I don't care how bad your situation is. It's not the world's fault. It's all, and it's not. I'm not gonna say it's your fault, but it's certain. If there's a gap between what you want and what you've got, then you go out there and you fix it. Because it is fixable if you choose to make it that way. And so I'm gonna end this by saying thank you so much, Nomalanga. Now, what is the title of your book?
Yeah.
I think people need to go buy your book. I really suggest people buy your book. What is the title of your book?
7 life-changing habits.
Yeah, and I like that. I like the book. I like the premise because you're a person who has had her ups and downs. I mean, you've made some mistakes. You did some things that as a young person, or put yourself in situations as a young person that you realized you didn't want to be in for life, and you climbed away from those scenarios and really created, I think, a great situation. And nobody's life is perfect, but I think that the fact that you've endured the effort necessary to kind of build the life you want. I think people can learn from that, and I want people to learn from you. I really do, and I know a lot of people
Thank
do, but I
you.
think a million people should be listening to you instead of listening to these idiots that'll tell you what you want to hear and then let take your money and then leave you just sort of hanging out to dry. I mean, leaving your life kind of, as good as
Right.
dead. And I just don't think that that's a way to go. Well, anyway, everybody, thank you so much for checking us out at Your Black World. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins. This is Nomalanga Mushali Moses from HealthyBlackWoman.com. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. And make sure you go live the life you want. Go grab that damn thing and go get it. The choice is up to you. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.